Hello, listeners. I am Dr. John Oberg. We are back for another episode of Tales of Abundance. And joining me, as always, my co host, Randy Lorensen. Hey, Randy, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm definitely looking forward to this conversation today.
It's funny. I was just thinking the exact same words. I am looking forward to this conversation. Today, we have with us Josiah Bryan. And for the listeners at home, Josiah is the Chief Technology Officer of Prasina Health, which is the medical practice we started a few years ago to end type 2 diabetes. But he's also the Managing Director of Josiah Bryan LLC, which does a lot of different technology work, specifically in AI. Now, Josiah is what they call a full stack engineer. He can do all of it, but he really has become an expert in the space of AI. He's starting to do some publishing in this space. And I think he has a really sober view on what AI is and what AI isn't. And I really want to dive deep into this. So, Josiah, thanks for being here today. We're really excited to have you.
Thanks, guys, for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation quite seriously. I enjoy working with both of you and looking like your perspectives on life. Looking forward to seeing where this goes.
And AI is being talked about ubiquitously, so much so that we have a horrible dad joke in my family that you can't spell blockchain without AI, and everyone rolls their eyes out of their head. And it's like, what is AI? What isn't AI? I mean, AI has been around for a long time on the predictive side. Generative AI is kind of a dining room table conversation now. Can you just give us a quick what AI is and what AI isn't, real briefly, kind of where we are?
AI is a term that's been around since the 50s. AI came up with as artificial intelligence. It's the idea of doing things at or near human level, or doing things that humans are good at, reading information, discovering, answering information. It's a very general thing. People often ask, is AI and machine learning and deep learning and generative AI, are they the same thing different? Picture them like a Venn diagram. AI is the overarching bucket of technology. It's the field, it's the label for the field. Artificial intelligence, and it describes to do something, to create a system, create machines or collections of technologies that can emulate human thought, cognition, comprehension, decision making. So that's the bucket we're working with. Everything we're going to talk about today fits within that bucket, that field.
All right. And so what's machine learning then? Is machine learning and AI, are they the same exact thing, or is machine learning part of AI?
Machine learning is the component of AI. It's one of the biggest, most visible parts of it. It came into vogue in the 1980s. And that is basically just a way of taking lots and lots of data, learning patterns from it in predicting outputs, giving you an output that is with some level of probability the right answer for whatever the task is. And machine learning is at its core, the emphasis on the word learning. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's great. And today, I think what we want to do is kind of get into a conversation that probably isn't a conversation for like the technophile. Like if you're super deep into AI, probably not going to learn a ton of new stuff today, because we're going to ask you to aim the conversation not that direction. I know that you and I geek out about that sometimes. We'll be next week geeking about that all week long.
Yeah,
into the technophiles and getting deep into the weeds together. But for today, I think we want to really stick to building it up from the basics and starting there. So talk to me about like this generative AI versus predictive AI, like large language model, like just for someone who's not really clear about what all this stuff means. Can you give us like the base definitions to get into the conversation today?
Absolutely. It stems from machine learning. So machine learning is a superset of generative AI. Machine learning. Generative AI uses machine learning to find the patterns in large, vast amount of data and then predicts the next word, the next token. So generative at its heart basically has this idea of we're not just predicting one answer. We're not predicting, is this a dog or a cat from a picture? We're predicting lots of things from a starting point, from the input. That is, Mary has a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow. That was something LLM would predict based on that amount of training data. It predicts the next few words are Mary had a little lamb. The interesting thing is that with a lot of this generative AI, depending on what you're doing with it, they'll take Mary had a little, then take that, put it back on the start of it, and ask what's the next word after that. It's the idea of generating a sequence of pieces of information called tokens from that. We know tokens like parts of words. So it's a subset of deep learning, machine learning. So you've got AI, the big picture, that's the field we're in. Machine learning, it's one component of it used to make AI. And then generative AI uses machine learning and deep learning to do what we know as chatbots or ChatGPT.
So it's generating the
Mhm.
next word in the sentence, or
Exactly.
word in the story, or the next word. Okay, so then what's predictive AI? That's been around for a long time.
It is. And that's back up a level under machine learning, deep learning. Predictive AI would be things like, well, here's an illustration that'll help you conceptualize what machine learning is, what predictive AI is, and what models are. Say I hire somebody, your son, to make a menu at a restaurant. He probably doesn't know much about vegan options, vegetarian, gluten free. Maybe he does, but
Yeah.
I'm going to assume that he probably has no idea what any of these food things are, how to make a menu. So we don't. When I hire him to make the menu for the restaurant, I'm not going to sit here and give him a class on it. If I'm doing a machine learning, I'm going to sit him down in a chair and I'm going to run hundreds of people past him. They're going to tell him about their preferences, their foods, and he has to find some pattern in that to be able to satisfy everybody's needs for the menu. And he's
Yeah.
going to make up this set of rules to make a menu. That's an equivalency for what machine learning does. And what he would have done then is predicted what the answer should be. For example, if you show a computer a picture of a cat or a dog, it's going to predict a label for it. That's predictive learning. It's using machine learning to predict something. It's typically a single thing. We'll use it a lot well, for example, I'll use predictive modeling to say, what's the price of oil going to be tomorrow? Traders on Wall Street have been doing this for years, feeding vast amount of data into a model saying, hey, based on the weather, based on the movement of these companies, here's what the price of the stock was or oil was yesterday. What's it like tomorrow, assuming that the weather will be this, assuming that this will happen?
And
That's
that's it,
predictive learning.
it's easier. I mean, predictive AI has been around longer than generative AI, and
It
so
has.
predictive is I'm assuming, well, it was first, therefore it was simpler. Generative is harder to do.
Generative just scales up and takes a lot more data, and it's a different application with different ideas than predictive learning. Predictive learning has been around, well, 1980s, 2010s is when it's scaled up and became very much in vogue. Generative AI really didn't come on the scene until 2020. 2018 was one of the seminal papers on it. But it is a scale up and a scale out and a new application of predictive learning. At its core, generative AI is still predicting. It's just being used in a different way. It's
Yeah.
predicting the next word. And so that's the one thing, then it predicts more and more. There's obviously a lot of technical nuance to that, but that's the easy answer.
And I think we'll get deeper into the kind of the big question that we have on the table, which is, is AI going to is it going to run the world or ruin the world, or neither? Which is, I think a lot of people are asking questions like that. Before we do that, how did you get into, computers and AI? Give us a quick backstory as to how you ended up here.
I was never a very good student. I got bored easily. When I was young, when I was in school, I would get A's one time and F's the next week. My parents would have to ask the teacher, "Are you paying attention to what he's doing? He's probably reading a book." Well, I was, because the students would ask dumb questions, so I get annoyed and I just read a book to keep myself interested. And graciously, my parents uh, taught me how to work with people. I credit everything, any social skills and graces I have, to my loving mother and father, who really worked hard to not only let me work with technology, but also work with people. But when I was 10 years old, I was enjoying wiring wiring my dad's old reel-to-reel tape recorder. I found that he had these giant speakers that if I reverse the wires on some of the speakers, make a microphone. My parents liked to talk about their family matters in the kitchen. They'd kick us out, say, we're going to have a parent talk. I didn't like being excluded. So I drilled wires through the floor of from my basement laboratory, and I ran a speaker on top of the fridge, ostensibly just so I could play music nice for my mom. But then when she found out that I was listening to their conversations because I had hot wired dad's reel to reel, she wasn't too happy. She was more mad that I drilled through her carpet, but that's another story. But
Of course you did.
inevitably,
Of course you
inevitably,
bugged your parent conversations.
yes. Inevitably, though, that requires a lot of manual labor. I had to get my fingers dirty. I had to mess up wires, find the shorts. And when they got a computer, it was this old Windows 3.1 computer, and I found out that I could be creative on the computer. I could make things on the computer without having to get my hands dirty. That opened up a whole new world for me. I was able to tweak some of the games that were existing on the computer. These, that worm game that goes around, you eat things, and they had one where you gorilla game where you throw bananas at another gorilla. And it was just this old simple graphic, but it had the source code of those games there. And this little 10-year-old kid, was playing with it, like, hey, if I change this, I can make the banana green. I can make the gorilla look like my dad or something like that. And that opened up this whole new world of creating software, of tweaking things
Yeah.
and learning as I go.
You lost me at Windows 3.1 being an old computer when that was like advanced for me. We were back at like Atari 2600 and Commodore 64.
I had a Commodore 64 too. I remember that.
As did I. That was my first computer.
It's
Amazing
great.
stuff.
Yeah.
Well, the story starts with AI, and this is where I'll leave off. Is when I was 13, my parents, we lived in Kenner, North Dakota, half hour from the Canadian border, and they would drive us into Minot, North Dakota once a week, where we would take gymnastics classes, and then we would also spend time at the library. And I would check out these amazing books at the library that just inspired my imagination. One of them was Serious Circuit Stellar. And in there, the article that caught my eye was Teach Your Computer to Program Itself. It was this very simple article about answering some prompts that would generate out code, but it sparked in me this idea of automating the work we do, making the computer almost kind of intelligent. And ever since then, I've been fascinated with it, with the idea of intelligent machines, of AI. And there's one other interesting thing that I want to relate is that I credit any ability to teach anything with my mom dragging my dad off stage. My dad is a very, very smart man. He knows Greek and Hebrew. He's a pastor, but when he was a young pastor, he was just being too smart on stage. He would lose the people, and my mom was very good at telling him, "Hey, Bruce, you need to speak at their level. You need to bring out the truths in a way that they connect with," and that has complemented my technology abilities, and they've taught me that skill, because the teaching and talking about AI isn't just to make us sound smart. It's to actually connect with people, because at its core, what we're trying to do with AI is talk about humanity from a different perspective and emulate humanity.
Yeah.
And so there's a beauty and creativity to talking about these things, that it's not just to be about being smart, but it's about connecting with people. I can go more into that, but I want to land it somewhere. So
Randy, that opens up a whole can of worms, right? Emulating humanity and all that stuff. That's part of the conversation you and I are having prepping for this episode.
Yeah. Well, let's jump into the deep end. And the question, Josiah, is, I mean, from the library in Minot, North Dakota, to today being an expert in AI, some people are afraid. We've watched the movies, right? We've all seen Terminator and whatever other movies where these robots, in essence, AI becomes our masters, right? So is it going to end the world? The second option is, are we going to be able to use it to create abundance and make the world a better place? Or is it just hype? So let's start. Is it going to end the world? Let's start there.
No, I come from a place of optimism and belief that there is a higher power, that is God, that He's in control of the world, and that's how I align my life with following God and serving Him. And part of that conviction is that He is in charge and He has His hand on the way Earth is going. And if AI is going to end the world, it's going to be by His approval and His blessing. More practically speaking, out of the realm of Christian philosophy, I think that there's enough good people that are working with AI that want to do good things with it, that it's not going to be as dark and dismal of a future as people are afraid of. The potential for AI to bless and bring abundance to humanity far exceeds the risks. That being said, I am not in favor of control of AI, of government dictation, of government restriction, or any sort of you can only develop this, you can only release new models if you preview it by the government first. Not a fan of that. I believe AI and technology should be open and free to the masses. And there's a lot that we can go into on that, but I will say I don't think it's going to end the world. I think the potential is much more of abundance orientation.
Okay, well, let's talk more about that. Talk more about how is it going to create abundance?
There's so many different applications around it. A lot of AI. Well, part of it is, let's first talk about the hype. So many people will want to say the hype is everybody thinks is such an amazing thing. They want to apply it to everything. And I think people are getting ahead of themselves in the adoption curve. They hype it up so much that then everybody sees a bubble. Everybody sees that it's not delivering on these promises that the hype people are bringing it. And so everybody then will say, oh, no, it's not going to do us any good at all. I take much more measured view of things, as you know, in most things. And so the benefit will take time to realize. I think it's going to automate a lot of the things that are grunt work type things. There was an article I read recently that was talking about wisdom and AI. And one of the things it talked about is automating research, but it also warns about don't take the research that AI provides with at carte blanche. Read into it with your own human wisdom. There's a lot we can go into on that. But automating these type of what you might call grunt work tasks, finding, filtering, and sorting data, summarizing data. AI right now, our generative AI is great at that. And as we delve into what type of tasks that humans are doing because we need to do them, can we automate with AI, freeing up people's times, bringing value to their lives, freeing them to do things that are uniquely human? I think that's one of the first areas that we'll see AI bringing abundance, bringing blessing to people's lives.
I think my observation, the people that think it's just hype are people that have sort of bought the marketing, the headlines, right? That they think, oh, it'll just do this and it's magical, and they don't understand the work or the steps that are necessary. Right. Would you agree with that?
You have to be very clear-eyed around what it can do. If I go onto a job site with a single tool, this amazing hammer, a carbide wrapped hammer with a steel head that has a nail holder, and that is just the best hammer you've ever seen, I'm going to try and use that hammer for everything on the job site. I'm going to try and put the windows in. I'm going to try and mount the door frame with a hammer. That would be foolish to anybody who knows construction. That's the knowledge that's where my knowledge of construction ends right there. But if you have a hammer, all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a hammer. So that's where the hype is that all these people are trying to use the LLMs for everything, and they're not delivering. They're not being careful and clear-eyed about what they can and cannot do, what they're good at, what they're not good at. And part of the problem is that LLMs, generative AI, it doesn't present. People that have trained these models and the way these models work, they don't present with any sense of, I'm not sure. They'll give very confident answers, even when they're confidently wrong, much like a 3-year-old making up stories about monsters under his bed. So it's that confidence.
And we talk about AI like everyone's used it. I mean, where we are today as we record this particular episode, a very small portion of the population is actually engaged with and using AI at all, and a much smaller population using it regularly. Like we're at the very forefront of the innovators curve, right? Where there's like the innovators, then the early adopters, then you have the majority, the late majority, and the laggards. Like we're pretty early into this thing. And if you look back at, the printing press and how it was adopted, and the steam engine, and then you look at like, nuclear power or the internet or mobile phones, or my personal favorite is cameras on phones. Like there are people talking about like, why would you ever want a camera on a phone? We have like great cameras. These are crappy cameras. And, you don't need a camera on a phone. And then a few years ago, there was more pictures taken in 1 year than the rest of history combined, with really high fidelity. And so, it's true that personal computers and calculators change the way we do work, but I don't know if that's for the worse necessarily. We can make an argument about that.
John, do you want to talk a little bit about how you're using it at Prasina and what uses and practical uses that you're implementing it in the everyday world?
Yeah, I mean, we're using AI to support work that has to be done, right? And so like in the patient recruitment cycle, there are people that want information about the new way that we do things, and sometimes someone's not available. And so, and this use of AI has been around for a long time. Nothing new we're doing here, where it's like you can talk to a co-pilot and find out what we're doing based on your given set of circumstances and schedule an appointment if you want to. And I would say that's kind of old technology on a relative basis. Like there are lots of companies that provide that type of technology that can be used. On the bleeding edge of what we're doing is when a patient has a question about their medical chart that the provider's already given them information for, we can have an AI go in and give them that information in a clinically sound methodology with no risk of hallucination, which is when an AI makes up information. Josiah and I have talked about, and we've created a clinically safe way of producing that data, which is for the patient, which I think is really, really helpful. And then we also use it to take data in for the patient. So if a patient has kind of what's called unstructured data and wants to get that to their provider, but the provider is not available in the minute, we can get it to the provider much, much faster. And there's lots of things we're doing behind the scenes to make the providers work less lifting for them technologically, and a lot of things other people are doing. And then I think the biggest thing we're doing is creating a new triage tool that is holistic in a way of supporting a new way of treating type 2 diabetes, where we've had just really great efficacy by taking vast amounts of data, in one case, 10,000 pages of data, and kind of boiling it down to what's the next one thing the patient has to do, which you couldn't do that before you had these types of capabilities. And so, and I think there's 8 different AI implementations happening in a very small medical practice, in a way that is, clinically appropriate and safe, and done, inside the regulatory boundaries and all that good stuff. So a lot of thinking has gone behind it, a lot of work, and Josiah has been really genius at putting some of these things together. It's been, there's been a lot of creativity that has to go into it, but it'll be things that we can, things we can do to change the way that we interact with computers. Sentiment analysis, Josiah, is a really interesting topic to get into, but a lot of times AI is looking at, what people are saying in text or voice, and AI doesn't today, as I've talked to many people about it, understand sentiment in the way that I understand it as someone who understands human behavior. There's just some things missing. And so we're actually able to go in and create a set of, AI agents, essentially, that can unwind some of that mystery in human communication in ways that other AIs just aren't doing that. And that's probably one of the most kind of leading edge things we're doing, is helping to demystify some of the human communication, where other technologies just aren't even contemplating that problem, let alone solving it.
And to listeners out there, this is really high level what you guys are doing, right? Like, this is clearly needs somebody like Josiah, an expert that is able to implement this. This is not done with the off-the-shelf ChatGPT or Grok or whatever things are out there. That those things, and I think maybe that's where some people's confusion comes, is they hear about stuff like this and they try to do it with the off-the-shelf stuff. Would you say that's fair, Josiah? Like, people you talk to, and
there's a lot of people that's their primary experience with AI, and that's where we as humans have this beautiful ability to anthropomorphize and to see humanity, see intelligence where there may not be. I mean, I saw my nephew playing with robots and giving them names and these little Lego things, and he has whole stories built up around their life. And we do that even today with ChatGPT. We ascribe emotions and intelligence to it where there simply isn't any. And that's when they see that intelligence, or the assumed intelligence, what they perceive as intelligence, faux intelligence, then suddenly they think that it can do anything. And then they run up against this wall where it can't really deliver on their expectations. Then the illusion shatters, expectations are broken, and they enter that state of, well, this whole thing is just BS and hype. That's really what's happening, is the internal expectations are being built up and then they're being shattered. And that doesn't feel good for any expectation, let alone new technology.
So let's talk about, because a lot of the people listening, that probably is their access to AI, right? They're using ChatGPT, they're using Grok, or whatever other thing is out there. So if somebody's listening and that is their access, what can it do well?
What it can do well is summarize and generate things. At its core, without anything else, it's generating and chatting with you. So you can give it information to chat about. Recent example of what I would do, what I've done that anybody could do with access to ChatGPT, is I uploaded a PDF called the Drama Triangle, and I wanted to figure out how it fit into something else that I was working on. So I pasted the PDF in there, pasted this 50-page write-up that I had done into ChatGPT, and I asked it some questions. I said, here's the topics on, look at this PDF. What do you think? Does it align with this other document or not? And that's something anybody can do. Rather than having to read through every single word yourself, you can use it as a research assistant. Of course, the same rules apply. Don't just take it at face value. Use some of your own human intellect to say, that doesn't sound right. Oh yeah, that does make sense. But that's an exact example. Now, as some of these companies get good at integrating it into their new products, Apple and Google being some of the examples that have just recently come out, that extends the capabilities and the access to AI in ways that go beyond that just chat interface. And we can talk about that if you like. Those are, I can point to those as going beyond that. That is access to the average person.
So I might be getting a little ahead here, but what skills, if the average person wants to do that, I think from my own experience, it wasn't intuitive right away what I really needed to be effective using those basic things. What basic skill sets do people need to develop for it to be
Ooh,
effective?
me. I want to say, Randy, you said this a long time ago. I think you were one of the smartest people around this. It teaches us as humans how to ask better questions. Like one of the
I was just going to quote that.
Yeah, it's like it reflects back to us the the inefficiency or the lack of skillfulness of the questions we ask, and can shine a bright light on how we don't connect well with each other. Like the number of times in a day that I have to stop conversations where people are talking past each other as a professional who works in that world, um, it's amazing. And so Chat GPT, or Gemini, or Claude, all of them respond appropriately to the prompt they're given. Bad prompt in, bad information back. And that doesn't mean that the GPT, or the AI is not working well. It's just not well prompted. And so my hope would be that, listeners here might think, gosh, I want to become better at prompt engineering. Yes, 100%. And also consider what that means in reflecting with the questions and answers you give to people in the real world.
And we will, for listeners, by the way, that's a pretty heavy lift, is becoming good at prompting, right? So go to our website, talesofabundance.com. There'll be tools on there that'll help you. But yeah, what John's referring to, wow, I remember that so well. And at the time I was doing a lot with Chat GPT, and I was talking to one of my employees, and I had given her an assignment, and she came back having completed the assignment, only she didn't complete the assignment that I had given her. And I started getting irritated. And my thought, I was like, well, why didn't she do what I said? Why did she do it this way? But because I'd been spending so much time in AI and prompting, when AI doesn't give me the answer I want, I don't blame AI, I just blame myself. And I go, oh, okay. I go back, I look at my prompt, and I say, that's why it responded this way. I wasn't clear enough here, right? And I realized in this case, I went back to that conversation and what I told her, and I'm like, oh, she did do the work. I wasn't clear enough in giving direction. So making it, that really has been the biggest benefit to me, is it's made me, it's still a work in progress, certainly, but it's made me better at communicating with people.
I'm not suggesting we should stop the episode here, but that's all we ever got to today. And that was the biggest benefit of AI. That by itself could change the world, because right now as a society, we don't communicate as well as we could or should. And if we could just have that one lesson, if I could have one wish for every listener in the whole world, it would be to use that mirror as a way of figuring out how we communicate with each other, and just being a little more thoughtful in the way that we prompt and talk to each other. So, all right, my soapbox, back to regular programming.
Well, let's go to we talked about the Terminator, Arnold Schwarzenegger coming back as a terrifying robot. So maybe it's not that, but I think a lot of people are worried that it's going to take my job, right? And I know, John, you referenced an article the other day, like what jobs will it take? And it was from, I don't remember the research. Let's dig into that a little bit. Like, what jobs is it going to take? Because I think we all agree it's going to take jobs, right? It's my opinion that it will create more jobs and more opportunity and more abundance in the world. Similar, technology, historically, people have been scared it's going to take their jobs. And while it does take some jobs, it inevitably creates more opportunity and more abundance. But what jobs is it going to impact?
I forget the exact quote. Somebody more well-versed and more eloquent than I said something along the lines of, it's not going to replace all jobs, but people who will succeed are the people that are using AI in their jobs. And that typically applies more to knowledge workers than more blue-collar-esque jobs. Even so, we've had trials of AI at, say, McDonald's, for example, where you say that they'll never replace workers with AI. Well, they're trying to with their ordering system now. McDonald's is rolling that back because of hallucination, because it wasn't working very well. They didn't do it very well. There's so many funny reports. And another poor example, well, I'm not going to go to Google putting rocks on pizza, but the types of jobs that will typically replace are those that are easily automatable. It will augment those people that are doing knowledge type work. And it will, those people that aren't able to use AI, such as these AI systems where you're learning to prompt and talk to people and talk to AI, it's going to make those people not be able to perform as well as the people that are using AI. There was a recent study of some and focus on software engineering of a set of senior engineers, a set of mid-level engineers, a set of junior engineers, and I forget which one was used as a control group. The takeaway from the study was that the senior engineers were more productive when using AI. The junior engineers were more productive when using AI. However, the junior engineers did not learn or translate their skills to other problems. They weren't as critical and as intelligent in their use with it. It was more low level. AI still did raise all ships. It did bring everybody and made them more productive. But you have to be good already.
In a different study, it showed that the middle performers had an outsized gain, and the top performers also gained, but gained lesser. So it narrowed the gap between middle level performers and top level performers, which was a really important insight into that jagged edge of, some of this talking about of performance improvement, right?
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. I forgot that nuance of the study, but that's an important thing to point out. To make it really practical, I don't have a magic ball that says these are the specific fields. We can reference studies that people have done, but I think it's the general takeaway is that it's good to get familiar with the new technology because A, it teaches you how to communicate with humans, as John was pointing out. But B, if you want a general filter to look at what jobs are likely to be replaced, it's going to be those lower level knowledge worker type jobs. Those are going to be the first to be impacted more heavily as they're automated. Some companies have touted how they've removed all of their customer service people that are answering the phones or the chats and replaced them with 2 or 3 chatbots. And they've just let go of that entire workforce. Now, to varying degrees of success, I'm not going to talk about the success of those right now. We can delve into that, but those are the types of things. That's a filter you can use for that.
This isn't the first time society has gone through this, right? Like when calculators and computers became kind of prevalent, you used to have rooms full of people who were doing accounting functions and reporting functions that eventually computers took over. And then people as a society got skilled in different areas. So I think there are going to be people that are going to be impacted, and there's going to have to be meaning for sure in society for certain places. And I think people are wise to think through how it impacts their particular, career trajectory for sure.
Absolutely.
But I think, there's going to be opportunity that comes from it as well. Like I just saw it a few months ago for the first, and this might be, 6 months ago, maybe even a year ago, job descriptions coming out for prompt engineers and prompt engineering supervisors. That didn't exist 5 years ago. And so there's new opportunities and those, skilled opportunities, which was great.
Yeah. Go ahead, Josiah.
I was going to point out the illustration of the buggy whip manufacturer just in support of that. And back when everybody was being driven around by horse and buggy, we had entire industries entire companies dedicated to creating buggy whips. And as automobiles came into vogue in the early part of the 1900s, those companies faltered, lost sales, and eventually you can't even find somebody that does buggy whip manufacturing now as a business. Right. It's sad those people lost their jobs, but I'd wager they found other jobs. And I don't want to whitewash everything. I want to be sensitive to the fact that we're talking real people, and I want to just say, oh yeah, everybody's fine. I'm sure that felt traumatic to the people that were losing their jobs during the time of buggy whip manufacturing. And yes, there will be people that are going to be negatively impacted. And I hope that's not the case with AI, but I want to be sensitive to the fact that there may be. And I don't have an answer for that. I want to acknowledge that.
If we take that a step further, right, we think about the buggy whips went away and the buggies went away and different things around horses. However, The automobile industry, I think it's safe to say, employs significantly, I mean, many multiples more people than those industries. But not only that, we then had a need for tires, which we didn't previously had. It created an excess need for fuel, which some people would argue that was a bad thing, but the need for roads and all the workers. I mean, there's many levels of jobs and all the machinery that were needed to build the roads, build the gas stations, and then that allowed people to travel. It made hotels more needed. And
Yeah, but we don't want to prove the fact that the person who lost their job printing the yellow pages because of the internet didn't necessarily go get a job with an internet company like that.
Right.
And I think that's the real understandable, valid fear people have. And so, I think, as a caring society, it's important for us to recognize all those opportunities. Yes. And it's also important for us to be, careful, thoughtful about the people that are impacted, help with the transitions. Yes. I mean, so there are all real issues we have to face along the way. That I think we want to be sensitive to. But that doesn't mean that I want to slow down innovation.
Agreed.
Right? AI is going to help us with a lot of things in the healthcare world in terms of research that I'm not even touching and don't know where it's headed, but it sure seems positive that you can go through. Like, I think, Josiah, correct me if I'm wrong, but like in developing software, you may not be able to use AI as effectively developing software as you'd like to today. But unit testing becomes a lot less expensive, faster, and your software then becomes less buggy if you can get from development into production more quickly, right?
100%. I've used it quite successfully for exactly that. And many of the things that I've been doing, it's much easier to use AI to generate some tests, and I'll tweak them, make sure that they work. But that makes the overall software much more reliable. It's putting a set of safeguards around software that I've written. So yes, definitely a beneficial thing to my own work.
So if either one of you were advising people, it could be somebody that works a job that maybe it's a call center, maybe it's a truck driver. It could be a kid in college, right? That I think is even a bigger challenge to know where the world's going to be in 5 or 10 years. How do they lean into this? How do they make themselves invaluable in the workplace of the future, right? Because I think there's opportunity here too. So what would you tell somebody?
That's a scary question even for me because I don't have answers to that are well thought out right now. I will tell you that the one rule I've learned as I've been growing in my life, my career, is it's less about the specific. It's less about simply being an expert. If all you are is an expert in one thing, your expertise alone means jack squat. It's about the relationships you build and the people you meet along the way, the community you build. If all you're focused on is being an expert at this one thing, you're not going to get very far in life at all. You need people around you. So yes, it's scary. Yes, you should still be good at what you do. I'm not saying don't acquire expertise. Don't look at ways to bring value and bring creativity and bring beauty to life, but don't do that in isolation without finding people that need those things. If you're an artist, you want people to look at your art. If you're a truck driver, you need people that are going to need your goods. And if you're a kid in college, you need to find ways that you can contribute value to society. What is your unique passions? What is it that you uniquely come alive at doing? And it may not be technology. For me, it doesn't involve technology, but there's unique things about that I can say it makes me come alive that will translate to other things if for whatever reason I can't do technology. So look inside yourself to find what brings you alive and find people around you and build community, because those two things together will help weather storms that may come.
Yeah, and for my kids, Randy, it's learn how to be a learner, because learning is only going to have to accelerate in their careers. And so they'd better learn how to learn really, really well and how to relearn and keep learning. So that to me is
absolutely
important early career skills they can learn. And the second one is be good with people, like learn how to be great with people, because that's going to be hot commodities of the future as we, as a society, unfortunately become more isolated and distant. Learning how to connect people and is going to be a very, very valuable societal skill.
Absolutely.
Great advice. Yep. Great advice. The learning thing, it also strikes me, one of the areas that I think is very likely to be disrupted is education. It's at some point, AI is really, I think, going to be able to improve education. So while they need to learn, hopefully AI can help in that. So this is podcast is called Tales of Abundance. I listened to a podcast.
Hey, Randy, hold on. I want to, too fast, man. I want to talk about that because it's already happening.
Go ahead.
So I ran a company, and I'm currently on the board of a company that creates curriculum for medical students. And they as they're creating that curriculum, they're finding ways to do it better, and faster and less expensively, and create a better experience. And so I think, I mean, it's already happening. I was just asked to sit on a national board for an educational growth fund that innovates and finds ways to deliver education less expensively, at scale. And I had my first board meeting recently, and so there's this group of people that you might not have thought were raising funds for this, but they, they came and interviewed me for a board role because they wanted to bring that, how do you scale it? How do you pick the right things? Like, so people who you wouldn't think were investing in that type of innovation are investing time, energy, and money right now today. And it's places that would shock you. That's not later, that's today.
Yeah. Oh, it's coming. It's definitely coming. So what I started saying about abundance, I listened to a guy on another podcast a few months ago, and he predicted that in the not so distant future, I don't remember the time frame, that there would be 2 to 3 person companies. So basically 1, 2, 3 people running a company, and they would become $1 trillion companies with 3 people or less. I mean, Josiah, is that what I'm asking you an impossible question, but can happen, and what kind of time frame?
When you say $1 trillion companies, that immediately you have to think about supply and demand. Who's spending $1 trillion and what are they spending it on? And yes, it can happen, but how frequently can it happen? How much room is there in the market for $1 trillion companies in the first place? But regardless of the economics of it aside, can it happen? Absolutely, it could happen today with the right app, the right niche. That was the dream of the internet bubble, is that you could just write one guy or one person could write an app and it just blows up and you make millions of dollars, and all you did was write a little bit of software. So with the scaling effect of AI, I was talking with someone, who was it yesterday? A couple days ago, in marketing, for example, oftentimes you have to build out sales funnels, you have to build out the ad copy, the email drip funnels, the drip, all these things that I don't even understand. I'm repeating words that don't make sense to me. But I've done enough ads online before to know it's a pain in the neck. And he was telling me about, hey, you just fill out this one form on this new app I found, and it generates a complete email sequence, a complete set of marketing funnels, and all these automations for you. That is the type of thing you would have to hire somebody for typically today. Build this out. You'd have a marketing expert to do that. That's a role that in some ways is just replaced by a single form, because we've got this generative AI that somebody has inserted and wired into this form. And there's a lot of work that goes behind it. But it does lend credence to the idea that, yeah, you could have a $1 trillion company being ran effectively by 2 or 3 people, augmented by AI and a suite of tools that replace a lot of these functions which you normally would have to have dedicated humans for. But a lot of these, you guys know the world of bigger companies better than I do. And so I say this very humbly, but there are a lot of roles that you can retrain people for very quickly. You can take a well-educated college student and within 2 or 3 months have that well-educated college student replace many of the roles. If somebody leaves, you could hire somebody again with enough intelligence and with appropriate amount of training. Those are the type of things that are going to be done effectively by AI. Not to dismiss the humans that are doing them right now. I'm not talking like that, but lending support to that.
We need all the expertise we have today and more. And so whether some of that expertise is going to live inside of AI, some of it's going to live inside of expert systems, some of it's going to live in people. When you start talking about like business models of employment versus non-employment, remember one time there was a big company that said, our revenue per employee is way higher than anybody else. And they came out with an announcement right after they had turned 300,000 people from employees into contractors. So I think the question itself might be a little loaded, right? And I think there will be of course there'll be somebody who figures out how to get a $1 trillion company out of a couple of 3 people. It's going to happen at some point, of course.
Yeah.
But I think, as we think about like entrepreneurship and moving into the future, I think Silicon Valley, has a form of entrepreneurship where they're building companies with $1 billion of market capitalization. But by number of people, that's not the largest number of entrepreneurs. It's the people who have the tire shops in the Midwest. It's the person who's got the bakery in the Southeast. It's the person, like, those people are entrepreneurs every bit as much as the people in Silicon Valley. Different economics,
Yes.
different, but very entrepreneurial. And I think that sometimes we make the mistake of looking to Silicon Valley only for entrepreneurship. Like, I think there is a certain appeal to that for people, and that's great. And I support that. I think it's wonderful. I'm right now. I'm in San Francisco right now for a conference, so very supportive of all that. But I do want to make sure that we don't lose that this country was built on the backs of a different kind of entrepreneurship as well. And that's a very important part. And I hope we have a lot of listeners that are kind of in all of those camps, going through that. So,
John, that segues in, doesn't really segue, but far be it for me to direct the topic, but it makes me think of this article I was reading earlier where it was differentiated between about wisdom and about AI.
yeah.
And one of the conclusions, one of the devices it had was less about technology and more about humanity. And paraphrasing, it says, in this current world we live in, it's so easy to get inundated with information. And with that inundation of information comes a lot of fear and a lot of concern about things that we can't directly affect or have any control over. The news today is largely plays to our emotions. In rewind 100 years ago, when we were less urban centric and less connected, there was a lot less of this instantaneous information sharing. We were more connected with what was immediately around us in our local community. That, whether or not information sharing instantly is good or bad, the effect was we had more of a connection with our fellow man. And that's a beautiful thing, because that helps us stay grounded, helps us stay connected. We're social creatures. We're not built to live in isolation. I think the conversion from living in the country to living in cities makes us think that we can be so very independent. But as I've learned living here in Austin, being independent is a sad way to live. We need connections even in cities. And so,
well, that's part of our key too, though. We're measuring the wrong things, Josiah. So I think you're hitting right on it. Like, we are about consuming things, and there are things we feel like we have to buy today that were part of a village, decades and centuries past. And that's really healthy for gross domestic product. And there's a couple countries that measure gross happiness product. I don't know what the right thing to measure, for success of a country is, and far be it for me to hold myself out as any type of politician, but we're measuring gross domestic product and GDP per person and all these things. And so there are roles that have nothing to do with money in our society that we don't value as much. And I think that's a problem.
Absolutely.
So it nothing to do with AI, but I think that AI could give us some of the space to go back and spend some of that time. Unfortunately, AI is a tool, like a hammer is a tool, and a hammer can be used to hammer nail. A hammer can be used to being thrown through a window. The hammer is good or bad. It's amoral. I think AI doesn't have quite that same amorality, because the person creating it can introduce bias consciously or subconsciously with an agenda, one way or another. And so there are some things from a regulatory perspective that I think are appropriately handled. But again, I'm a guy that thinks we've got to be careful about how much we regulate that if we're going to continue to grow economically.
Yes.
Let's dig deeper into that article, Josiah, because you shared it with us, and I read it, and I thought it was interesting. I have a fair amount of pushback. I know that's shocking, knowing me, on a couple of things.
Randy, what don't you push back on?
Not much. I tend to challenge assumptions a lot.
Let's talk about certain definition of words.
Irritates people some.
Healthy discourse.
But the article talks, and I don't know, you could probably summarize it, and you've already summarized it some, and we can put it in the show notes and on the page for people to look at on talesofabundance.com. But it talks about how it's good at taking a lot of information, putting it together, right? That human brains can't do that well.
It being AI, right? AI, this is what AI is doing. You got it.
But it comes at it more from a you mentioned wisdom. It talks a lot about wisdom. It doesn't have wisdom. It doesn't have real intelligence. It doesn't have love. It doesn't have compassion, empathy, all those things, right? I mean,
Yeah.
is that
Yeah.
a decent overview in your opinion?
Yeah. It starts about the idea of how to effectively use AI in Christian ministry when you're talking about using AI to read the Bible, read moral text. And it talks about the application of that and how to effectively use that for practitioners or people who are doing that work. And it does draw the delineation between today, what AI is good at, and that is summarizing and synthesizing and answering questions. And again, when I'm saying AI, we're talking a lot about the generative AI, the LLM side of things.
Right.
And so it's very good at collating all this vast amount of data, finding these things, the needle in the haystack, answering questions on that. It doesn't have any concept of being able to reflect on its own experiences. LLMs do not have self-reflection. They don't have the ability to say, well, this is a good decision, this is a bad thing. They don't have the ability to make moral judgments based on empathy and compassion. They're simply predicting the next best word based on vast amounts of data that they've learned patterns from. And that is today, and that is focusing on LLMs. I may make that a very firm caveat because I have some disagreements with the conclusions as well of the article.
So I think where I want the three of us to explore here is, I guess I think of AI much like a child, right? A child doesn't have a lot of wisdom yet, or most children, but as life goes on and through our experiences and whatnot, we gain wisdom. I feel like we're sort of at that same stage with AI and LLMs or whatever it is. And
I don't think we're there, Randy. I think that, when you talk about that, a child has emotion, and that emotional processor exists for a child, right away. And there's a reptilian brain in a child's brain that is processing different than, the cerebral cortex, which is much more like a computer. And so it may be true that we haven't found an emotional processor for a computer yet. Like that part, I agree with. We haven't found that. And if we do, that may change the game. But I think one of the dangers we run into is that a computer may, and probably can today if we ask it to, emulate emotional language, and it can draw on and feed the emotional experience of the person interacting with it. And I do think that you bump into some dangers there. I think that just from a species perspective, if you've ever read Brief History of Time, what Sapiens, Brief History of Time, I think it's called.
Mm-hmm.
And then you kind of hold that out versus like some of the robots that are being designed to handle like the sexual desires of people. You could see how that would lead to, reproduction, less reproduction, lowered birth rates. And then despite any, biases you have towards any of those things, like that could hypothetically endanger a species.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's not that the tech, that again goes back to technology itself is inherently amoral, but the application of it makes it a moral good or bad. And I agree with you, John, that the originators, the AI can induce their own moral bases, whatever to it, but it still is that's amoral. The application of it in this case, I think we're running up against something in this case is you have to confront the inherent leanings of man or women and of humankind. We have inherent nature that drives us to certain behaviors that are selfish and self-serving when left alone in this world. And that is going to dictate a lot of these negative uses of technology, of AI, of money in general. As I say, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts, absolutely. And that's what we're running up against here in AI used for these, or machines used for these sexual gratification. It's an application driven by our inherently selfish desires. And there's solutions for that, but that's not a technological solution.
So appease me here a little bit, or play along. How do humans gain wisdom? Think about people that are really wise, right?
Yeah.
Where did that wisdom come from?
Taking it from a pure perspective that doesn't involve referencing scripture of the Bible. Practically speaking, it's going to involve experience and reflection and somebody, parents, society to guide on whether those actions were good or bad, and the ability to reflect on that, the ability to be a good learner of the repercussions of your own actions, and then be able to think and predict and by experience that, oh, if I knock this glass of tea off the table, it's going to make a mess here. I'm an adult. I have that choice, but is that a wise choice? I'm going to waste time later. That's something you can only learn by experience.
I think that's true, Josiah, but I think that's true for one path. I think there's probably, and let me just caveat all this by saying this is not an area of my professional expertise at all. So I'm spitballing here, but I would say that that is one path of many. And I don't know how many, maybe it's 16, maybe it's 16,000, but I've certainly met people that are wise beyond their years. I've met people that are saying things at, 13, 14, 15 years old. And by the way, I look at the wisdom of the framers of the Constitution, and, they were writing these documents that were like, they're 30-year-old, people writing documents that could live and last for a couple hundred years. Like there's a level of wisdom in that room that I would say is, I don't know if supernatural is the right word, but certainly beyond what I experience in people of the same age and experience that's, 200 years later. And then
200 years later is, I want to emphasize, camp on that for a second too, because you've highlighted the certain people wise beyond their years, the depth which they write. Two things I want to point out. Some people wise beyond their years have gone through things that they should not have had to go through to get them wise beyond their years. That's all experience based. Well, not all.
I've met people today that are 13, 14, 15 years old that haven't gone through things and are wise beyond their years. So I think that's I think there's many paths. I've also met people that are, lots of experience, not very wise. Mm-hmm. So and we should go find if there's experts in this space about developing wisdom. Like we should go and figure out science behind it. I'm just not familiar with that science at all, if it exists.
Well, I will say that the practical advice offered is, first of all, slow down and appreciate the things around you. And that's practically advised by this article that we're talking about. But that part of it is not necessarily connected with a specific faith. And so that does apply to the larger aspect of reflection, self-reflection. Those people that are able to reflect on the consequences, the outcome of their actions, will inherently grow wiser than people that just act without thinking, don't learn from their mistakes, so to speak.
I have a lot of thoughts here. I'm going to try and put these in so I don't ramble on. So I agree a lot with what Josiah said, but I also think in today's world, there is so much bad information out there, right? And the internet has made that worse. AI might be making that worse now. And all of this information, the founding fathers who, John, I couldn't agree more. They were amazing. Mm-hmm. I don't think I'm not saying they didn't have bad information, but they weren't inundated with as much bad information. Okay. Something near and dear to my heart, money and understanding of money. If you listen to any of the founding fathers talk about it, they all understood economics. Mm-hmm. And in today's world, in my opinion, that number's not even near 1% of people that understand it. And go ahead, Josiah.
I would recommend people to look at a book called Deep Work by Cal Newport. And John, maybe you'll have opinions on the recommendations there, but the thing that stands out to me is also part of the advice from this article that we're talking about is embracing the embodied reality. Part of that is being able to learn to focus deeply on things and think deeply for yourself. And the embodied reality part is acquire your own experiences, get off the screens and learn from people around you. And that the deep work part of Cal Newport's advice that I'm referencing here is being comfortable, not just being inundated by everything coming at you all at once online and getting overstimulated by this information, but learning to discern. And it's almost like you have to go through this detox of wanting information as fast as possible with little or no thought about the veracity or the utility of it, to taking information perhaps in smaller chunks and thinking and ruminating on it deeply. I would have to imagine that's what a lot of our founding fathers did with economic theory, with information they've heard about it. They probably spent hours thinking about it, discourse with one another about what's the best way to structure this system of economics. There's a lot of deep work in that we as a society, these 200 years later, have almost gotten afraid of doing because we're so addicted to instantaneous access to information. My dad had a professor in college who told him in Bible college, he said, you know, the problem of your generation right now, and my dad's generation is older than me, obviously, is getting access to the information. He was using card catalogs. You remember those? You'd pull it out, look up, you know, the Bible, look up dolphins, and you find that catalog, that number. You go to the shelf where it is, pull it out, and then you have to read it. That's limiting your access to information by how quickly you can find that in the card catalog. And the professor wisely said the problem of your generation is access. The problem of the next generation is going to be what to do with the unlimited access that they will have. That's where we find ourselves today, is because we have unlimited access, it's hard to filter out, hard to know what to do with all of this information. Yes, AI can help us with some of that. Again, referencing back to its ability to summarize and collate, but that puts the responsibility on us as humans to think for ourselves. That's a skill, as trivial as it sounds, it's being lost and has been lost, especially in reference to our founding fathers, that ability to think deeply and be okay with that and spend time in deep thought and deep work.
I
So
think
yes,
you're,
yes to deep work, by the way. Cal does a great job going through that. I think there are people that would say that there are some powers that wouldn't want you thinking for economic reasons of their own. And so I don't, maybe that's a conspiracy theory, maybe it's not. I haven't thought through that perspective and that lens enough to know, but I think it's plausible that that there are people that are motivated by their own power or economic reasons for gain that may not want others to think deeply. It's not in their best interest that as a society. And do keep in mind that, you know, our founding fathers were around. There was disinformation, there was character assassination, there was lots of that type of thing happening, but it was slower. So there was much more time to process information. And I do think that if we don't get some type of screen around, like the First Amendment does not protect your right to walk into a theater and yell fire. That is
absolutely not. No.
You know, and slander and libel, defamation, those things are also, you know, against the law, but we don't enforce those things. And until we as a community decide to say, hey, look, like, the problem is who's the arbiter, right? It's just such a difficult problem to, like, this is a really intractable problem seemingly about how you get people, because, you know, your facts, my facts, your truth, my truth, like, what can you agree on? What can you not? Randy and I got into the other day about a single word, and, you know, we were both right coming from, and it was, you know, I think, Josiah, you might have witnessed that conversation.
I witnessed for an hour. I witnessed that conversation and continued on text later. Yes, I remember this very well. Yeah. It goes to the source of truth and the intention behind it, and that's true for any sort of thing like this. You've got to. Yeah, go ahead, Randy.
Oh, no, I wanted to go back to what you said about processing all the information, right? Humans, as we process information, we are looking at that with our knowledge, our reasoning, our creativity, our understanding. And that is where I think that wisdom comes from, through those experiences. And the more good inputs that we have, the more good teachers, mentors, it might come from religion, it could come from anywhere, right? That all creates wisdom. And the bad inputs slow down that search for wisdom, right?
Yes.
My theory is that AI is doing the exact same thing. AI is taking, like ChatGPT is taking all this information from the internet, and so much of it is crap. And
that's why Google recommended putting rocks on pizza or glue on pizza, because it couldn't distinguish satire from the facts, and it's ingesting vast amounts of data in the form of these LLMs, right. And it's the training. So I agree with you 100% in as much as vast amounts of data.
Bad information in, bad information out, right?
Yes.
And I guess my question is, if it was programmed properly to somehow be able to decipher that, as maybe this is a process of it growing, maybe it's coding, maybe it's prompting, is it impossible that it creates wisdom much like a human creates wisdom over time? I know this is a crazy concept, but
I just used AI to ask a question about how humans develop wisdom, because I knew there was, like, none of us are the expert on this. And so one of the cool things that came up, it went through all the different multidisciplinary approaches people have taken, from psychology to neuroscience to social cultural, sociological, philosophical, and psychosocial. And then it gave some conclusions. But the thing that it talks about in here that was really interesting in several different places is it walks through the importance of the emotional regulation and maturity on developing wisdom. And so I think I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. Until a computer has emotion and has to regulate that emotion, it may be incapable of developing wisdom, because that appears from my 1 minute of reading. By the way, I want to remind the listener, still not an expert after reading my chat GPT answer, that there's something about the intersection of the cognitive and the emotional that is foundational to wisdom, is what I'm getting from this quick 10-second view of the summary of chat GPT model 40 or 4.0, whichever, I'm not sure what you call it.
What's the old joke? Knowledge is knowing that tomatoes are a fruit. Wisdom is knowing you don't put them on a fruit salad. And that's the illustration that's often passed around in a joking form, but that it has at its core truth. And with most jokes, there is that nugget of truth. Even your dumb dad jokes, John, is that the nugget of truth is here. The nugget of truth is that wisdom, knowing that tomatoes, you don't put them on fruit salad, is being able to reflect on how that would turn out. What would that feel like? What would that do to the fruit salad? That would be nasty. It would not taste well. It wouldn't jive with the fruits. It's that reflection. It's not pure facts. It's an experiential idea. And imagine people who make that joke, assume that you've eaten a tomato at some point in your life. You have an experience of what that's like. You've had a fruit salad. You know what fruits are like. And so that's wisdom, because of this embodied reality that you've lived, that you can reflect on these things. It's not simply reading facts off a page, which is what our current LLMs are great at doing. They can tell you what a fruit is, what is not a fruit, but they don't have an experience of that.
This is probably a great place to interject on reflection. Do you know where bad rainbows go, Josiah?
I have the foggiest idea.
They go to prism.
Oh,
don't worry, it's always a light sentence.
Randy, do I have to continue listening to him? Can you just take over now?
No, we can just mute him. Do everybody a favor.
Hey man, I didn't bring up the dad jokes. You brought it up, and then you said, which, I mean, at that point you couldn't stop me.
Of course,
fair enough.
queued it up.
God knows we tried. I was trying to send psychic beams that clearly I don't have that skill.
Our producer, we can fix it in post.
Yeah, that's right. We'll fix it in post.
And I think the other challenge here is deciding what is the truth, right? And John, you referenced this earlier, people talking past each other, and in today's society, good Lord. I mean,
you just took me to my emotional part. Now you hit a nerve.
Yeah.
Truth. Like, this is what I tell my kids, like, you can have your opinions. If they're well-formed, it means you can argue both sides of it, and then you choose your side. Like, that's a well-formed opinion in my perspective. And you can have emotions, like emotions you can't control, and they're valid. Yeah. They're feelings, but you don't get your own. Like, that's the part where I tell my, like, you don't get your own set of facts. And this idea that there's my truth and your truth, where people like co-opt a word, that actually, what it does is it limits the amount of vocabulary we have to communicate with each other by making something mean that it doesn't mean. And this is where I think we can very quickly start to try to win an argument by changing definitions. That's like changing the number 2 in the middle of a math equation. Like, it's just it's not intellectually honest. And you've heard me say this before very recently. Like, and by the way, and you changed my mind too, because you brought new facts to a conversation, right? We were talking about something, and I said, hey, look, I don't think this has happened, but if you bring new facts to me, I'll change my mind. And you went off and you found new facts, and I changed my mind. And I think that's the way discourse should work.
Yes. Right?
But you can't do that if there's if the ground is moving underneath you because you're not agreeing what a word means. Like this is a problem with discourse. It's a problem with communication. And by the way, because we're talking about AI, if we can't think about the definitions of words, it's going to create a prompting problem. It's creating an information problem. It's just a problem all the way around.
So when I'm saying I think the truth is complicated, I think we had, so I want to keep this evergreen depending on when people are listening, but we had a debate recently. So whenever you're listening to this, just think of a political debate. Right? We just had a debate, and the exact same words were heard whether people were on the red team or the blue team, right? yet they completely hear the words are the same, the definitions are the same, but because people have different beliefs, different values, they have different truths in their mind,
Well,
right?
I think no, they have different. No, they don't have different truths, Randy. They have different perspectives. We have a word for that in the English language. Two people look at the same rock, and everyone agrees that you don't see the same thing, right? But you can measure the rock, and that rock has a weight and a mass and a volume and measurements, and it has a chemical composition. Those are truth. And then when you and I look at it and see different things, we have two different perspectives about that truth. And I think it's really important. That's really important language, because there's things you can measure that are either measurable changing or immovable or whatever. And the reason I say it is not because I don't want to be the arbiter of truth. Like, that's not my job. But I do want to make sure that we have really crystal clear language that we can use. And look, language evolves over time. I accept that. But what I want is people to connect. And connect means that you've got to have a basis for language. And if two people don't agree that 2 = 2, then you can't do math together. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I don't think it's that clean. And I'm gonna give you an example. We have a dear family friend, and I remember the first time she came over it was Christmas or Thanksgiving dinner. And her and I sat and debated. Yep. And it was friendly, and we were still great friends, and neither one of us took it personally, which we need a lot more of in the world. But we talked about various topics, and her basic belief system is that, so for example, we talked about education. I remember specifically. Her and I both wanted the same thing. We both wanted kids better educated and a better country, a better future, all of that stuff. We didn't discuss that, but we both accepted that from the other one because we had a mutual respect. However, my belief is that, but let's start with hers. Her belief was that if you just keep giving more money to the schools and more money, that it would improve education. My belief is that that hasn't been working for all these times, right? And that the private industry would find a better way of solving that problem. We didn't argue over any definitions, but we debated, argued, and it wasn't just that topic. It was multiple topics because we had different beliefs at our core, different values, which therefore shaped the conversation. And I think that happens a lot. And and where I'm going with this, by the way, is that I think we're going to have the same challenge with AI, depending on who codes, who creates it, and AI is going to have different, it's going to give different results based on how it is created in the first place.
Is there such a thing as violent agreement? Like, I am in violent agreement with you, if that's even a thing. Right. I don't know if it's not. But like, I couldn't agree more with you that if you have two people that give two different definitions of the number 2 into 2 separate AIs or into one AI in 2 separate times, whatever the case may be, like we're gonna exacerbate a problem. And that's not an AI problem, that's a human problem.
It's a garbage in, garbage out problem. If you feed AI in information to AI that says our founding fathers were men, and then also feed in information that says we need to prioritize access for minorities to political establishments, and you ask it to generate a picture of our founding fathers, guess what? Sometimes it's going to generate pictures of our founding fathers of a different race, of a different ethnicity than the truth of the matter was. And that is representative of somebody's perspective or bias he's influencing ground truth. And so we do have to be careful about the data and who does it, because one was truth, one part was good that you fed into that AI. That was the pictures of our founding fathers being male. And the other part was somebody's emphasis of their values, that we need to provide wider access for minorities. I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm pointing that as a subjective thing, somebody's perspective rather than a measurable truth.
And this is where you need to be careful about facts versus perspective, right? So if someone said, hey, and we need more politicians like our founding fathers, and if an AI were to take that to mean that we need more politicians that have the same racial characteristics, like that would be a total disservice to what we need, in our country, which is diversity of thinking, diversity of backgrounds, like diversity of opportunities. Like, I think, and candidly, I've said to lots of people, I think we need, people with, that look like us talking more about diversity, and not just the three of us. Like, we need diverse people in the room helping that conversation to be intellectually honest.
Yes.
Because I know that I got blind spots there. And so,
Yes.
but it's making sure we parse out, like, what's the fact, what's the perspective, what's the opinion, to make sure that we don't confuse one.
Absolutely. I think we settle on that there are things that are measurable, and those things we call truth, those things that are objective, and those things that are subjective, those things that are perspectives or values based on our values, opinions, and subjective ideas. And both are important.
I'm not even saying measurement, because there are some things that are truth that are agreed to be truth. Like, we can also agree on.
Yes,
but
I agree.
We start disagreeing about truth, now we have perspectives.
Yes.
And all I'm suggesting is that, not that one person's perspective is less or more than, but we just use a different set of language so that we can have the conversation in a better way.
100% agree. But you're right, this is going to be a problem that will affect AI as it goes. And we're not going to achieve AI by just feeding it. We're not going to achieve this human level of AI where it's going to grow and provide wisdom and empathy by simply feeding it more and more data, more and more vast quantities of data, scraping the internet for every piece of information. It's going to require further innovation, further thinking by creative individuals, by intelligent discourse that brings to bearing expertise in these various areas of psychology, of the way the mind works, and the way humans learn. And that sum total of things will produce a set of technologies that does show empathy, that does emulate emotions, that may actually emulate wisdom. That's not that we're going to replace humans, but it will be more than the sum of its parts. You look at our own human mind, and I'll stop rambling after that. We're not simply one type of brain matter. We have our thymus, our prefrontal cortex, our amygdala. All these parts have specialized functions that are designed in different ways, that are designed to work together, that produce you and I, that have thoughts, that have feelings. And so we're not going to produce a system that emulates human function in all these different ways by simply focusing on one type of technology. That's all that we have generative AI as, is one type of a subset of one piece of technology. Think of a car. You've got wheels. You've got guys and engineers who are great at designing brake systems. The guy in my church back home, he designs brakes for planes. I thank God from every day I fly. He's an expert at those things. He's not an expert in the whole plane. Brakes don't make the plane fly. They make it stop. They don't make it fly. Same thing with thinking. We're going to have people that are experts, and we design these large language models, but they're not going to be the sum total thing that make us fly with AI.
It's a great place for us to kind of start to wrap things up. Randy, what's your big takeaway from today's conversation?
I think it's going to be an exciting future, and I really do believe that it's going to lead to abundance. I think we have to stay diligent. I think there's going to be trials and tribulations and potholes along the way, but I believe in the human spirit. I believe there's people are more good than bad, and there's certainly bad people in the world, and that good will win out, and we'll figure this out. We figured out the A-bomb. I think, if we can figure out nuclear energy without killing each other up to this point, we can figure this out, and people are going to use it for good. And it's figuring out how to use it in our lives to bring good and bring abundance to the world.
Using it wisely.
What's that?
Yes, I said using it wisely to play on the wisdom.
Yeah. And I think being in it every day, I think today was a great reflection on just how early we still are. Like, it is early days. And that, I think I'm with you, Randy. That's exciting for me. I think that there's lots of ways we can implement this to make for a better society. It also underscored for me the importance of what AI is not going to do, and how we have to really disconnect. And, I think there's times in my life where I've done a really great job of that, and times in my life where I wish I had done better. And so I think the two things I'm taking away with: early days, really excited, and there are good times to step away from technology, screens, all that stuff, even if for an hour or two with friends. The three of us get together, this group, once a month. We do that regularly, but I think just it's a good reminder to step away occasionally. And, Josiah said the word detox earlier. I don't know if that's the right word, but definitely step away and
Making it part of your practice of connecting with your fellow humans, your tribe, the people you're around, building community. I think that's something that, as I've been preparing to talk about this today, has really been emphasized to me and convicted of, is that I need to emphasize the disconnect, the contrast from being around technology. If nothing else, as I do that 24/7 just about. So disconnecting from that and finding the joy and the beauty in our fellow humans, and slowing down and just appreciating people for who they are. I might even start to like your dad jokes, John.
Probably not.
No, I wouldn't go that far.
I do think, though, Josiah, it'd be fun to have you back and talk about the research and get into the technical stuff for the technophiles in our audience. So I think let's have you back in, and we'll get into the technology and the brass tacks of AI as well, and how that translates to the everyday user. So great stuff. Thank you so much for being here today, Randy. Always great to see you.
Yeah.
Looking forward to the next episode. So join us again, talesofabundance.com. Join our community. Follow us, like us wherever you listen to your podcasts. Come check out the show notes and get the tools that we will put up for you to read about some of the topics we had today. And then get out there and talk to people. Get out there and learn more about prompting, and use AI as a mirror to figure out how you can be more engaged in asking questions and interrelating with your human village and tribe. So thanks for being here. We'll see you next time.